to the Zveda podcast. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Lorena.
We're a community for women by women. We're here to help each other rise to impact generations. We're so excited to be with you this week.
Yeah, we're super excited. Just want to give everybody a reminder that, the general kind of flow of our podcast is that we'll talk about what's trending in the world and how it affects our lives as women and being in the workplace. Then we'll tackle the topic that we have slated for each week. We'll jump into that deeply. We'll give you a tip on health and hospitality, and then we'll answer some of the questions that you've been sending our way.
Yeah, so don't forget to submit your questions. No question is a bad question. We want to hear from you. That is what is going to help build this community and help us learn from each other. So be sure to visit Zveda.com, Zveda.com, and send us your questions, and we'll remind you again at the end of our podcast today.
Cool. So let's go ahead and jump in. Jamie, I want to talk about a topic that is trending recently. Something that we've been discussing is knowing that there's a lot of change happening, especially culture world at large with COVID-19.
Yes.
We really want to address, okay, there's a lot of transition happening, and what can our attitude be during transition?
Right. So transition looks very different for each of you, I'm sure. So many of us obviously have been called to stay home or stay home as much as possible. Many of your jobs, you're moving to work from home. Thankfully, if you have that opportunity, just grateful for that. Schools are closed. I know parents, if you're a parent of a small child or a child in general, it's that question of like, oh my gosh, what do we do now? Just routine. Our routines have changed from where we shop, how we shop, being able to go out to eat, being able to gather together, and even our health and fitness, right? Like I really miss my boxing gym. But, they've had to close, and we've all had to get inventive and creative on not only our own schedules, but how are we going to do business? And so we wanted to talk today about some of those thoughts that we have, some of the ideas that we've been hearing from various people all around the world, and just getting creative. So I think one of the first things we really wanted to talk about is, how do we handle transition? What is that when we feel out of control? What can we control?
Yeah. What is a way that you can navigate through things that are shifting, that are changing constantly, and still feel a sense of kind of groundedness in the midst of all of that? And as we were just talking about this, just a couple days ago, just sitting in my kitchen, we're just like, really a big part of navigating through transition really well is knowing that you have authority and control over your attitude in that. And so that's something that really just stuck out to us, is like, you can choose to have an attitude of gratitude. Is kind of how I like to say it, is really like seeing everything from a perspective of being thankful. And it just brings, you out of the chaos of the moment, day to day, minute by minute, up to this broad, 20,000 foot view of seeing, everything in perspective. And so having an attitude of gratitude is super helpful to navigate things that are changing or that are new.
Right. And I think the other thing we were talking through is how to set your schedule. It can be very easy, especially when you're working at home or you're having to be at home for a long period of time. Maybe your office is closed, you're on a break right now, but it's maintaining a routine of some sort. So from the perspective of working at home, later on in our podcast, we're going to talk about examples. Like how do I do that? How do I set my day? How do I set my space? How do I keep from going insane or stir crazy from having to be inside, whether I'm by myself or in close proximity with my family members?
Yeah, that's good, Jamie. And kind of the third thing that we were talking about is, again, how do you navigate transition? What are some things that you have control over your attitude, your schedule, and lastly, your support network. Like you really get to choose to stay connected and invest in those relationships that can walk with you as circumstances are changing, or as, like Jamie was saying, like a lot of us are having to figure out how are we going to work remotely in this time. And so really staying connected with parents, with friends, with just other family members and extended family, and letting them speak into you and remind you of who you are in the midst of circumstances being in flux.
Right. So that's what's trending. Most definitely. We're all there. So I think the most important thing is just to recognize we're all in this together. In a lot of ways, we're all having to learn to navigate transition in a huge way. And, transition, those big life transitions, that's something that we really wanted to, that was actually the foundation for this podcast.
It was
to help specifically young women, but, obviously that's broadened across all generations and all people. But with transition, how our attitudes are such a huge part of that. So,
yeah. That's good.
It's just foundational. And I think we're all learning. Excited to hear more from you, though. So be sure, again, in the comments, in social media, just let us know how it's going. How are you transitioning? What are some of the ideas that you've put into place that are keeping you sane, that are keeping you grounded and keeping you positive?
Yeah, it's good, Jamie. So now shifting gears a little bit, we wanted to talk about how do you define success?
Ooh.
That is our
It's a big one.
Yeah, that's our key. So as we're recording different podcasts, this is a big topic that we wanted to lay out foundationally. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking through different mindsets that we feel can be limiting in some ways for women, especially those that are wanting to move into the workforce and advance in their calling and careers. And so this is one of them, is laying that foundation of knowing that success is something that you have the authority and the ability to shape that, to create that. And it's not just going to be something that someone else will do for you, unless if you actually give them that right to do it for you. So we wanted to talk about that because we wanted to remind, everyone and teach everyone that that's something that is in your realm of authority.
Right. In your realm of control. Right. And the reason why we want to bring forward these limiting mindsets is because we all have them. These thoughts come from where we grew up, the household we grew up in, the people that were in our close circles. We all have some sort of limiting belief or have had a limiting belief along our journey. So I know that I have.
Same.
And I want to be able to talk through those things and give perspective so that maybe we can squash your limiting belief much earlier than I maybe squashed mine or are still working through. So let's dive in. So our first old mindset is the way you define success is you need to make money and you need to have a title. We've all heard it, right? That title, that certain income number, you may even have one in your mind. You think on it and you have this mindset of, if I can just achieve that, then I'm successful. And I think that's something that we want to shift today. So when we talk about a limiting mindset, we not only want to squash it, but we want to shift and turn to a new mindset that's more empowering and can give you more strength
to rise.
Exactly. I love it.
No, it's true. And so as we're, again, like Jamie's saying, first having to lay the ground, okay, what is the old mindset, or what actually might be, some of our current ways of thinking, identifying that, because you got to know where you're at first in order to then be able to define where you want to go. So laying that out, that, okay, maybe like the current thinking is I have to have money or a certain amount of money to be successful, or I have to aspire to this certain title or work at this certain place or have this certain job to be successful. But really, Jamie, why is it that we want these titles? Why is it that we want certain levels of income or money? What is that rooted in?
I think just selfishness sometimes and pride. So is one thought. But I also think that we have to recognize that wanting those things is not bad. So we live in a culture where it's, I have to compete, take a step up, step on whoever I can to
carve out your own space.
Yeah, carve out your own space, keep up with the Joneses. We've all heard the terminology and the phrases ad nauseum, right? So I think that's where that really stems from, is our culture, and that we tend to think that you're only successful if you're on camera, if you're on video, if you're, an influencer, or you're a C-suite, and the C-suite means you're making a lot of money, but ultimately that's not a truth. And I think that's what we really want to talk about today, is the truths behind that. And I think number one is recognizing that wanting to be successful is a great thing.
It's a good desire.
It's a good desire. And I love that we were talking the other day, and the phrase success and money in itself isn't evil. In fact, Lorena said, it's like...
So it's funny. It's like, all right, so if you go on a road trip, you have to have gasoline, right? Like, to make your car go. Same kind of thing. Like, you have to have money in order to do certain things in this world, in the current culture that we live in. So money itself is not evil. It's like, again, if you're going on a road trip, you don't have gasoline, you ain't gonna go nowhere. So like, it's part of the journey, right? But it's not the destination. It's not the why you're going on a road trip. There's a whole greater purpose than just the gasoline getting you there. But it's a vehicle that moves you forward in helping you move towards what you're called to and achieving your purpose. But that's the focus. It's not just aspiring to get a certain amount of money or have a certain kind of title.
Right. And I'm taking a course right now. It's offered through a organization called Wealthy. And it's really, finally, after all of these years, giving me the ability to recognize those limiting beliefs that I've had about money, and being able to embrace the fact that I not only want money, but I need to learn how to steward it well. And so I think that's part of being able to shift this mindset, is understanding, like, if you think about how much money is enough. That's one of the questions that the instructor, Christina Wise, raises, is what is enough? How much is enough? And then she gives the illustration that, well, the more you make, typically our lifestyle we keep spending. We make more, we spend more. We make more, we spend more. And before we know it, we're never getting, we have that never getting ahead type of mentality. So it's learning to really steward our success from a financial perspective well, because ultimately those are the things that help us to come alive. That helps us outline or discover, I should say, our purpose. When we can define not just, I want to make this money, but what do I want to do with it? Why is this important to me? And how am I going to create or give back? And all the other things that we want to do with our money. So,
and then even on the title front, like, how can you leverage a position of influence in order to do what it is that you're called to do in your purpose,
right,
instead of just aspiring to have a certain title on your business card, or thinking that's a certain, level of responsibility when it may in fact not be. So as we've talked through, that money, titles themselves are not evil. It's, they can be vehicles that are part of the process of you getting to where you want to go and a part of your purpose. So we kind of want to break things down a little further and talk about, okay, if we have the authority to define success, how do we even go about doing that? We have to first have a sense of understanding of our purpose. That is key, because that's like the compass that will direct where you need to go. As you're reading, a map, you'll have that compass that will help you answer different questions that come your way. You have to know your purpose so then you can know what you want to say yes to and know what you want to say no to.
Right. So whether you work for an organization or you decide to create your own business and be an entrepreneur, everything is great. All of it is good. And so one of the first things that we wanted to do was raise a question for you to really, really think about. So hopefully you're in a place where you can record these, write them down, put them in the notepad in your phone. But what do I want to do in my lifetime? And what do I want to achieve? So obviously, this is a question you can ask yourself at any point in your life, right? I wish I would have asked myself that when I was starting my college journey, but it's never too late. And I think it's important if you are listening to this and you're in high school or you're in college, really take a look at this, because we often will go down a career path, an education path that someone else has said we should do and that is put in front of us.
Yep.
And that's okay. That can drive us in a different direction. But I think answering these two questions will help you determine, number one, what type of college do I want to go to? What type of education do I need to get? What is that degree that is going to be important for me and my journey? And then ultimately it will define your career path.
Yeah, it will. I've often, different young women that I've coached one-on-one, I love to explain purpose as kind of like this overarching umbrella. It's like an arc over your whole life, right? Like getting a sense of like why you're here, like, and what is it that you want to do to change and impact those around you. And then a lot of times you'll have what I call missions. So like very specific assignments that fall under that one umbrella of purpose. And so having a sense of purpose then allows you to know what specific things or what missions you're going after. So one mission or one assignment could be in the next season, okay, what college am I going to apply to? Like that's a very specific thing. But if you have an idea of your purpose and knowing what you're called to, it helps you limit out other options that could be good for someone else with a different purpose, but what is it for you? So I think that's like important.
Discovering what you're passionate about is what you had shared as well. Like understanding, what am I really passionate about? What really frustrates me that's going on in the world that I want to change?
Yep. Yeah. So I think that's a good point, Jamie. And another way to say that is, where does your passion and a need of society cross? That is key to understanding your purpose, because it's knowing like what makes you come alive, or what just like, like revs you up, and like even if it's like a righteous like anger or justice about something, and then a significant need in society, where those two things cross, that ultimately is where your purpose lies.
Right. And oh my gosh, how powerful is that? And I think so many of us stay in career because we just don't think there's another way, or we haven't taken the time to really ask ourselves that question and be honest with ourselves.
Well, a lot of times too, I feel like we're often looking for someone else's path to give us a roadmap for what we're going to do. But the reality is we're all created in the image of God and in his likeness, and we're all very unique. And so what's beautiful in this process, and we'll talk about this more, is that figuring out your purpose and then steps you're going to take is a continual partnership with the living God through the Holy Spirit inside of you. And it's that dialogue and that regular communication with him that brings forth things in their due time. And so I think that's what's key, is we can't look to what other people are doing necessarily, because that might be what God has called them to and the purpose that they have on their lives. But yours will be unique. Mine's unique. Jamie's is unique.
Yeah. And then we can bring those forward and all learn from each other. So that's the beauty of really finding our purpose as well. So a couple of questions that we wanted to put forward, additional questions. And I think, we'll post these as well on social media and probably our website, so that you have these in front of you from the podcast. But These are questions that will help you test whether you are truly aligned with your purpose. And I just can't emphasize enough, ladies, just take the time. Take 10 minutes, take 15 minutes. It doesn't take much. I mean, ultimately, I ended up spending more than an hour on it to really think through these things, but it doesn't have to. Just start asking yourself these key questions. So one is, where am I going? Why am I going there? Who is going with me? How am I going to get there? Am I truly realizing my full potential? Is there value and fulfillment in my work today? And what unmet needs am I moved and positioned to meet?
I love those questions, Jamie. And they actually come from a really powerful book, one that I read probably 4 or 5 years ago. The author, her name is Susan Scott, and it's a book called Fierce Conversations. And I want to read a quote from a part of that book that really frames these questions. She says, "I'm successful to the degree that who I am and what I live are in alignment. In getting to this place of alignment, one thing is clear. The quality of our lives is largely determined by the quality of the questions we ask and the quality of our answers." So as Jamie was saying, really taking the time to ask ourselves the hard questions and to really just spend time dreaming in our hearts, like, what is it that we feel called to do? What is our purpose? And again, why are we here on the earth? What do we want to change during our lifetime?
Right. And I love the first two questions. Where am I going and why am I going there? Because we can be on one path and realize, yeah, why am I?
It's true.
Am I doing this for me, or am I just on this path because I'm used to it?
Yeah.
I'm getting
or someone else has done it before and it's comfortable.
And I just, it's just encouraging to hear that we don't have to do that. You know, we can often get stuck in our bubble and our routine and like getting up, going to work, coming home, getting up, going to school, going to class, and not taking a moment to realize I'm not really even interested in.
Do I have to do this?
Right. Do I like biology? Do I like? No, I don't. But again, we're joking here, but also just taking that time to really think about where you are and what you're doing. And is it something that you could see yourself doing 5, 10, 20 years from where you're sitting?
Yeah. Yeah. So that kind of first piece about really understanding your purpose is key in order to define success. But the next piece of that, so kind of like broken out into 2 different sections here, is actually taking the time to map out what success looks like for you. Because again, it's like you know what your purpose is, you know that overarching kind of umbrella again, right? But what are some specific missions or assignments that you can be going after? If you have some guide rails that you kind of set out or some guard posts to map out you like your path that you want to take, that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah. And Lorena, I want you to talk about the second point here. Because I think it was a professor from UT that shared this with you.
Yeah. So this was my senior year in my undergrad studies at University of Texas here in Austin. Hook 'em.
And I'm an Aggie, so gig 'em.
It's fun. Yeah. And he gave us this assignment, and it was our main assignment for the whole year. We didn't have any finals, any midterms, none of that. Like, it was just this one question. And the question was, all right, see yourself 2 years from now on just a Tuesday. I don't know why Tuesday, but he said Tuesday. And what is it that you're doing from when you wake up to when you go to bed? What are you doing during the day? Who's there with you with what you're doing? And he literally just he was like, take the whole semester to map that out. Whether it's you're drawing it out, you're writing it out, literally imagine what that day consists of. And I think that's so important because written in the Old Testament, there's a scripture that without vision, people perish. Without taking that time, again, coming back to partnering with the Lord, to identify what it is that you're dreaming about, that your purpose is, that you feel called to, getting so specific about it, then it actually empowers like a drive inside of you to figure out the specifics of, okay, how can I make something like this happen? Also with the caveat of knowing like we can make our plans, but God ultimately like has something more like wild and amazing. But we still have to have vision, right? Because then we're not going to be moved to even go anywhere.
Yeah, I think in that sense, it's a partnership, right? The Lord gives us the idea many times. He provides open doors. He allows us to be creative, but if we don't put our hands and feet literally to work on it, he's not going to do the work for us.
Right.
So we have to actually be in partnership with that call, with that purpose, with that idea, and start to put focus around the vision. And ultimately that leads to determining what career path we need to be on.
I'll also share another kind of concrete example that really stuck out with me. Again, it was the same professor, but I just had coffee with him at one point, just a really cool conversation. And he gave the example of, when we're in high school or even in college to some extent, a lot of times you can equate that to a locomotive or a train being on train tracks. And to be successful, the track's already laid out before you, and you just got to put the coal in there. You got to set it on fire and apply steam, right? Like, I mean, you go forward, but the path has already been predestined in a way, or it's already been created by someone else. Your professor has laid out the syllabus and you need to do these certain assignments. And if you do them to a certain level, you get an A, you get a B, you get a C, et cetera, et cetera. But someone else has already gone before you and mapped it out. He said the key is when you graduate from high school and you go into the workforce or, college, same kind of thing. If you're, graduating, going and getting a job, or you are starting your own business, you then transition from being someone who's in a train, like making it go forward, to a human being on roller skates.
Wow.
So at that point, now you begin to feel your muscles for the first time. And it's like, whoa, like this feels very awkward. Like I feel like I'm going to fall, because not only are you having to apply the energy to move forward, but you also have to choose what direction you're going to move forward in. No one has mapped out like where those wheels are going to go on the bottoms of your feet. Right. And so to me, that was such a powerful example. Like right after I graduated from UT, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's why this some ways like feels really hard, because success isn't just mapped out for me unless if I give someone else that right to do it, but realizing like, no, like I'm a woman of power and authority who has been gifted by God to do certain things. So if I'm going to, walk this out, I need to partner with him to kind of define, okay, what is it that I am walking out?
Right. And, as you were talking, Lorena, I thought, what better way to give an example than for us to share, because we have time, a little bit about how maybe our purpose has changed or shifted, come to life. So I wanted to share that I've been in the workforce for over 20 years. When I started out, as a high school student, very creative, very outgoing, loved music, loved speaking, really had this desire to be, I knew I wanted to be sharing something in a big way. Like that's as far as I was able to define it at that time. And, many years went by, all learning, great things from the career path that I have taken. But I would say it wasn't until I really took a moment to do exactly what we're saying to do, and that's to sit still with the Lord and ask the questions, allow him to speak into me to say, what am I doing this for? Really that big question, what am I doing and who am I doing it for? And what do I really want to accomplish before my life on this earth is over? And I realized that just career and where I wasn't exactly it. It was good.
Yeah.
I was helping others, learning a lot, but I had this realization that my job on this planet is to help young women. That's my purpose. Right now, where I sit is to help young women understand the challenges that you're going to face and help you to overcome that much faster. So if I can share a challenge or an experience that I had along my career journey, I mean, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have help. I had to figure it out on my own. And thankfully I did, because now my purpose is to take those things and help you skip rungs on the ladder. That's my purpose. I'm very clear about it. I want to be able to bring that forward to you and help steward community to share the challenges that we're facing and speak wisdom into that. And then ultimately separating that purpose with, now what do I want to be making? Not just for myself, but I want to be making a specific amount of money because I want to give back. I want to be able to then turn around, like we see individuals across our planet do, writing some big checks to allow young people to start their dream or launch their dream. So that's really tying not just that, the purpose that God puts in our heart with what we're doing in career. In my current career, my 9 to 5 is actually doing just that, helping
So cool.
to steward women in the workplace with leadership and mentorship and process and guiding. So that is a very exciting thing to do from the 9 to 5, this podcast, and then also to outline, that how does the financial aspect tie into that to offer strength to those around us.
Yeah, and I think that's so powerful, Jamie. Just your story and how even I love what you touched on, because I talk about this too when I'm coaching young women one-on-one, is a lot of times when you're dreaming up with the Lord, okay, what is my purpose? What is my calling? A lot of times those answers are actually hidden in what you love to do as a child.
Right.
So like different,
Right.
where you we're performing and like putting on different productions for your family and for peers.
Yes. In my dad's workspace on his workbench, that was my stage. Come on.
So fun. I know. I mean, for me, and part of the reason why we're partnering in this business is because kind of similar heartbeat, right? But for me, when I was a young girl, I loved to make up dances as well and just perform those for family and friends. And so I love to be creative and to share that with others. But I also was one who I had a little classroom set up in my bedroom, and my mom would take me to the teacher's supply store all the time. And she'd be like, and this is what I love about her. She just was so for my dreams. And she would just be like, all right, Lorena, go in the store, pick out whatever you want, and we'll set it up in your room. So I had a little calendar, I had an overhead I got for Christmas one year, back when overheads used to be a thing. And with all my teachers, I'd be like, hey, can you give me extra papers of these assignments? And my mom would make copies of them for my imaginary class.
Right.
I just love to teach. And what's really neat to see that whole thread come through is now my passion, especially through Zveda, is I want to teach women how to rise and how to be successful in the ways that God has, or the areas that God has called them to be successful in. So that's a big part of what I feel like my purpose is to teach wisdom and revelation and knowledge to young women, to cause them to really have my ceiling be their floor, so that they can rise.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. So as you can tell, ladies, we're very passionate about this.
So much.
And so to put a pin in this main topic today, just defining success, that you can define your own success. And it is going to take a bit of work for you to sit still, for you to ask yourselves these key questions that we've been raising to you today, and really,
and I think to kind of just sum it up, some of those questions to take away is, on a random Tuesday, 2 to 5 years from now, what do you imagine doing? Who do you imagine being there with you? And then also, what is an area of huge passion for you, and where does that cross a need in society? That's where you'll find your purpose.
Perfect. All right. So health and hospitality tip for this week. So we've been stuck inside.
So much.
And I know some of you are in the same boat. And so we just want to share a tip on health.
Yeah, so I've got one, and this is actually a really great example that ties back to what's trending. As all of us, like Jamie was saying, have been, transitioning to what does it look like to do life remote. One of my shameless plugs, Camp Gladiator. I work out with them on the side. I've been doing that for about 4 years now, I think, and it's been a blast. But they've been super innovative in this time. So normally, I don't know if many of you are familiar with CG Camp Gladiator, but they do full body workouts outside. And they have trainers that come, you bring your mat, you bring your dumbbells, and you just go for it. And it's a really great community bonding type experience. So fun. Anyway, so in this time, since a lot of, gyms have been closed and yoga places have been closed, what they've done is they have released a campaign called Hustle at Home. And they have different trainers that they're filming at 5 a.m., 8 a.m., 5:30 p.m. on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then 8 a.m. on Saturdays. And they're putting all these workouts on Facebook Live and they're releasing them to the entire world. They're not just keeping it to their own community of people who have paid to be with CG. They're just releasing it. And so I'm like, how brilliant is that? Like they're helping a need because a lot of gyms are closed by providing workouts. And also this is huge for them, to have just brand awareness, and they'll probably build out a whole other part of their business because of this. I'm like, that's really cool to be innovative in this time. But just, they've got some really great workouts. You can just search Camp Gladiator Hustle at Home on Facebook and find those. Some of my trainers have been leading them. You'll find me on one of them actually from from a week in March.
Look for Lorena.
Yeah, super fun to be building some muscle, to stay moving, especially as we've been inside a lot. That's my recommendation for health.
Yeah. And ladies, this is really, really important. And this segues into our next segment here, but getting yourself moving your body, getting out of your jammies. I know it's tempting to stay in them all day. Don't. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But this is great for not only your physical well-being, but your mental well-being. Move your bodies, get some exercise. Wow, Camp Gladiator is really showing us. And I know others are as well, but they're being innovative and creative and helping us keep moving during this time. So our next segment is Women Want to Know. Ladies, you want to know. And here are a few things that we've heard from you in our community. And it's been around the question of, how am I supposed to be productive while I'm working at home? So we want to take a bit of time. We mentioned it at the start of the podcast, but to really talk through the importance of mastering your daily and weekly schedule. So here are a couple of tips that we want to go through. And I think the biggest thought that I can share, or idea that I can share with you, is to create that routine. Mm-hmm. It's so important because it will give you that sense of control
and groundedness.
And yes, and groundedness. So you don't feel like you're just reacting to the situations that are being thrown at you for the day. So obviously things might change. You may have meetings crop up on your calendar. That's fine. This process that we're going to share really helps to give you a foundation. So my suggestion is either Friday before you sign off or Sunday before you start your week to sit down and map out your schedule. One of the biggest tips I think that we've all heard is get up, get dressed for the day.
Yeah.
Start your day like you would going into the office or going into work. So stick to your routine. It's just that you're picking a space in your house to go to versus driving to an office. It's going to be important to eat. I mean,
yeah.
I know
I've forgotten. Hangry.
Yeah, I've forgotten. I've been working and working and working, and then 3 o'clock, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have not eaten since 7 o'clock this morning. Mm-hmm. So
it's block off that time for lunch, in the middle of the day, because our brains need that break too.
Finding time, like Lorena said, to work out, put it in your schedule. If you don't do it every day, fine, but 3 times a week, put that in your schedule so that you're holding true to that. make sure you're taking breaks. It's important to get up from your space, walk around. If it's nice outside, walk outside, take a few deep breaths. Those breaks are going to really give you that calm and re-energize you for the rest of the day.
Yeah, and so Jamie's been talking through, some of these tips that are really good for working at home, specifically ones that are related to work. One being that, when you first jump in to the day, like check your emails and know if there's anything immediate that you need to react to, so that if you have to change your schedule, you can do so at the top of your day instead of like feeling, like Jamie was saying, like very kind of reactive.
Right.
And when are you going to fit something in? So yeah, check your emails, respond to key ones, top of the day, to keep things moving. Another piece that we've found is that try not to schedule back-to-back meetings. I always say leave like a 15-minute buffer in between meetings. If you have to, schedule one that goes from, 9 a.m. to 10, have the next one start at 10:15. Give yourself that grace, because sometimes meetings go over. And then too, you don't want to be jumping from one meeting to the next. You want to give yourself that little bit of space for your brain to, process what just happened and then now prepare for what you're going into. So it's really good to have that little bit of a buffer between those. And then lastly, we just talked through is that our brains do really well when they can switch between activities that are pretty active versus ones that are more passive. So an example of an active activity is running a client call or making a call. That's something where you need to be engaged, you need to be anticipating, different questions and answers. You're dialoguing with a person, whereas something that's more passive might be you're creating some kind of intellectual property for your organization, or you're writing some documentation down, something that you'd maybe would schedule a block of 3 hours to work on something, where you're just kind of cranking it out. So have a mix between those two things so your brain stays flexible and nimble throughout the day.
Wonderful. I mean, I think that those tips are great. It'll help you to be productive, get yourself ready for the day. And I'm not going to just dismiss the fact that fixing your hair, putting a little gloss on, a little powder and mascara. Ladies, it helps. I know it helps me when I look in the mirror and I'm not afraid of myself. So while we're on this remote working schedule, who knows how long that's going to last, just hold true to yourself, take control of your day, and schedule your work day.
Yeah,
it's important.
It's good.
All right. Well, that brings us to the close of our podcast this week. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll be joining together next week. Remember to go online at Zveda.com, Zveda. Submit your questions. Join our community. Ladies, we will talk with you next week. Woohoo! Thanks for listening to the Zveda podcast. Keep your questions coming so we can rise together. Visit Zveda.com to talk to us and join our community. That's Zveda.com. We'll see you next week.